the final speaker of this session is Tom. He's also coming from Ghent. And he's going to tell us about rational term equality.
Yeah, so this talk is not actually the third talk in your program. It's the last talk in your program. And this talk is about determining equality of rational terms. It's third work with Bruno Oliveira. And before I'll tell you how we solve this problem, let me say what rational terms are and why equality is difficult for them. So what are rational terms? They're terms built from constructor symbols, so uninterpreted symbols like Oliveira type constructors in Haskell, and infinite terms, so they're infinite types, but they have only a finite number of distinct subterms. And while you're trying to understand that, let me show you an example. Here's a very simple one. It's an infinite stream of alternating numbers 1 and 2. Okay, so it's an infinitely sized term, but there are only a finite number of distinct subterms in this infinite stream. Can you see them? There are actually 4 distinct subterms. The trivial ones are the numbers 1 and 2 that occur an infinite number of times. We also have 2 infinite streams here that are subterms of the overall infinite stream. There's the top level stream itself that occurs at every odd position, the odd tail of this stream, and every even tail is also another stream terms 2, 1, 2, 1, and so on. So even though it is an infinite term, there's only a finite number of amount of information present in this rational term. There are many applications of rational terms. I won't go into the details. There are some references in the paper. An interesting example is representing recursive types that is infinite expansion of the type. So we want to look at the equality of rational terms. And what's so difficult about them? But if you just write your rational term, this infinite stream of Haskell, and you compare it to itself, and you wait for the answer, and you wait forever basically, because what is Haskell doing is it's looking at the first elements, comparing them, they're the same. Okay, let's go to the second element, it's the same, the third, and so on. It's basically going down the infinite stream forever. And okay, so that's a problem. There's only a finite amount of information present, so we should really be able to determine the equality in a finite amount of time. But of course, this representation is not going to do it for us, because Haskell cannot see that there's only this finite amount of information present. So let's solve the problem by moving to another representation that makes the finiteness explicit. And how can we represent the rational terms in a finite way? Well, a convenient representation is a graph representation, where we only have the actual information present, and then we have cycles to indicate that this information is going to reoccur again and again. So for our stream 1s and 2s, we have the top node with a 1 and a cons going to another node with a 2, a cons again, and then we have this repeating pattern. So we have a cycle back to the beginning to indicate that this is going to happen again and again, this pattern that we have here. Now, how can we represent this in a functional language? The graphs are not very hard to represent. Well, the idea that we're based on is representing them using binders. So where we have our stream here, 1 and 2, and then we have a cycle back to the beginning. So we're using a binder to mark the beginning of the cycle, and then we use the bound variable to indicate that we have a loop back to the beginning of this cycle. Okay, so now we have this functional representation, but it's still not very convenient because we cannot pattern match on the binder. We can just we cannot really take it apart and look at it and see that this variable binds back to that thing. So we're going to make the binder a bit more explicit by using the structured graph representation that Bruno has come up with and is going to present in a couple of weeks at ICFP. And here we're using this explicit representation of binders with the rect data type, where we have this new constructor here that indicates that we have a binder. We have a bar constructor which indicates that we have this expression that is a bound variable, bound by some binder. And then we have another constructor in here that is going to mark all the occurrences of the constructors of the rational term. Okay, and what the constructors we're using are the ones for the list, for the nil and cons, to potentially represent infinite streams. So this is a representation. So the binary representation makes the binary explicit using these view and var constructors so that we can see where the cycles occur and where the derivatives are pointing to. So this is basically a false representation, a parametric hierarchical syntax representation of our graph. And Bruno already came up with a function to determine equality of different representations, but it's a very structural equality function. It's going to compare the var constructor with the var constructor, mu with mu, in with in, and if you have another combination of constructors, then it's always going to be false. So this is very structural, it's just checking that the constructors match up this binding pattern. And that's not good, that's not what we want, because it turns out that the same rational term actually has a number of different potential representations. Okay? So these two graphs represent the same infinite stream of ones and twos, but the representations are different. So this structural equality doesn't work, because you see that here you have a binder at the top, and there is no binder there. Okay? So the binders kind of get in a way of determining equality. It's nice, this representation, because it's a finite representation, but the binders get in the way. So we have to get rid of the binders. And we're going to move to another representation. That's going to be more convenient. And to get rid of the binders, what can we do? Well, we can basically unfold the cycles in our graphs infinitely, and to transform our graph representation into this unfolded representation as a fixed point of the list functor. It's not very difficult to implement. And what you get then is this unfolded representation. We don't have these binders anymore, we just have the stream again. Okay, the stream again, that's not good, of course, because then we're back to the initial representation. That's a problem. Then we've lost all the information that we have here, only a finite amount of information. So we have to do a little bit more than just this basic unfolding. What we do is we have to still make it possible to observe some kind of sharing of information that's occurring again and again in the stream. And to do that, what we do is we're going to mark all the nodes in our stream. All the nodes that are the same basically get the same information, the same tag added to it, which we call a pointer. So the node 1 occurs again and again, and it gets this tag of 1 to indicate that the first and the third node are basically the same node. The second and the fourth get another tag because they are the same. And we only need 2 tags for this infinite stream here because we only have 2 different nodes in the stream. So the tags are indicating that we have only this finite amount of information. And going from the graph representation to the stacked list of pointers of this stacked list is not so difficult. We just have the fixed point definition where we have this pointer field that captures the tag for the node. And then you can transform the graph representation to the stacked list in a very easy way by giving all of the different constructors a different number. And once we have this representation, that is basically an infinite stream, but where we have only a finite number of distinct tags in them, that's very convenient to determine the equality of the rational terms. There's actually an existing algorithm by Hopcroft and Card to do this that we can adapt to our representation. Their representation in their algorithm are finite state machines that we can apply it to our representation as well. And this is basically how it works. So you start from the top of your rational terms, and then you're going to compare pairwise the different nodes. So here we're starting at 2 different representations. We're starting at the top, and we're comparing the 2 nodes. And first we're going to look at their tags. We have on the left a red tag with 0, and on the right a blue tag with 0. So they're different tags, different color here, so they're not the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to remember that they actually should be the same. Okay? As we continue, we will have this information still available that we actually created those 2 tags. And then we're also going to look at the structure. We have 2 consoles with a 1, so it's the same structure. So we're going to move on. So you remember that the blue and the red 0 should be the same thing. We're going to down into the term to the next node. We're going to compare them. Again, they have different tags. So let's equate them and remember that. Look at the structure. It's the same console with a 2 at the head. So let's move on. And So when we moved on, we had to go around this cycle here in our infinite representation, so just an expansion downwards. So there's no actual cycle there. But we move on, and now we're comparing one on the top and one at the bottom. They have different tags. Okay, so we're going to equate the tags, but we also see that the structure is the same, so that's all fine. Okay. We continue, and now we end up at two nodes where the tag, we've remembered that the tag should be the same thing. Okay. So this means that we've already seen these two nodes, and we've already determined that they are actually the same thing. And this means that we're done. We don't have to continue. We've seen this before, and we've already determined that it's the same thing. So that's why we can stop now. We've seen everything. If you create everything, that should be the same. And we're now confident that these two representations represent the same rational term. That's basically how it works. So you've got to equate tags into, you've seen everything, and you've determined that they're all the same. So it's basically a kind of by simulation of two graph representations that's happening here. And it's very easy to write this up as a functional program with our representation with these tags. So we're comparing two different nodes. They have some tags and they have a structure attached to them. So first we're going to compare the tags, see whether they're the same or not. If they are the same, then we're done and we don't have to go on. But if they're different, then we have to look into the structure and see whether the structure is the same. Now, this is not just a pure equality that's happening here. We're basically doing this in a particular monad, or in a finite monad. It's going to remember that, it's going to collect all the information of tags that we have equated. So it's going to look up this information in the monad to determine the equality. And if the two tags are different, it's actually going to make them the same thing. So it's going to remember that they should be the same if they're not the same. If they're not the same, we look into the structure. That's kind of trivial, looking at the structure to see whether it's the same thing. So most of the work is happening in this comparison of the tags, the pointers. And we're doing this in union find monad, where we have the find and the union operation. So we're not actually going to compare the tags directly. We're going to perform the find operation from union find to see whether they have the same root, the same representative, and whether those representatives are the same or not. If they're not the same, well, then we're going to make them the same. Basically, remember that they should be the same by unioning the two representatives. And that's basically it. That is the equality of rational terms. So let me summarize. What we've done is to implement the rational tree equality in a purely functional way. We're using a structured graph representation. This is a finite representation of rational terms, and then we're transforming it into this pointer tag infinite representation to be able to conveniently implement appropriate graph algorithm. I've shown you a very simple example with infinite streams. In the paper we have a more generic implementation that works for any traversable functor, like for example trees, not just lists. And when you have trees, there's also another kind of interesting pattern that can happen, where you can have this kind of crosswise sharing, not just cycles that go back to some ancestor, but cycles that go across different branches with a common ancestor. And that means it doesn't work for all kinds of functors, it only works for traversable functors if you have this kind of crosswise sharing. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions?
Could you define the algorithm you described on the rectifier order by just adding there and then
You could do it on that representation. Then you always have to kind of handle the cycles yourself.
Yeah, then you unfold yourself.
Yeah. That will be piecewise as it goes.
Yeah.
And our info representation is very convenient because we don't have to do that. And it's very cheap to just continue.
You tagged your algorithm as purely functional, but then you told us you're using union find.
Yeah.
Does that imply you've got a purely functional implementation of union find? Because that was always the one data structure that sort of resisted a purely functional implementation.
It is a purely functional representation, but the question you have is probably whether you have the same complexity as in an imperative language, in an imperative setting. And that's not the case.
So you're not using the normal union find structure with upwards pointers, etc.
So we don't have arrays. We use maps to emulate arrays. So you have a log factor in complexity.
Okay.
The next challenge would be to formulate minimization. This was the first algorithm in the area of equivalence checking of finite state automata. It's a very tricky algorithm for actually doing minimization. Tricky in the sense that I would imagine doing this functionally and addressing algorithmic aspects would be a fun exercise.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I also looked at it, and that algorithm kind of has a different structure. Here with the rational trees, you have kind of a top of your tree that you can go down. And with minimization, you typically look at the whole set of all the nodes in your graph at the same time. You're kind of comparing those pairwise.
Can be understood actually as being the dual here. You're taking a refinement, you're starting with a refinement of the partition and making it coarser.
Yeah.
And in the classical, it's still the best algorithm for minimization doing the other way. You take a maximally coarse one,
right.
Partition of the existing nodes and then refining it as much as necessary.
Right. Yeah. So I think it means a different kind of approach than in this implementation.
Since this is a conference on implementation, have you explicitly rejected the hashing comms?
No, I have not. So actually the focus hasn't been on getting the complexity right for union find itself. I think that's a separate challenge from doing this algorithm.
Right, okay.
See, in the application strand, not the implementation.
Okay, and let's take the speaker again.